Yeah, hello, this is Dave from cheapbooks.com playing World of Tanks. This video is about bonds. Bonds are a skill-based currency available in World of Tanks. And even though it was launched as skill-based, it doesn't mean it's going to be skill-based forever into the future, but currently they are skill-based. It's a skill-based currency. You can win bonds by playing ranked battles and by playing grand battles, which hasn't been released yet, and by doing special missions. For example, if you go to your missions tab, they haven't released any that have bonds yet, but they've said that they will offer them in the future. You get bonds for gameplay. So, for example, if you play in a ranked battle, you come over here to where it says random battle and you select ranked battle. You can earn bonds by moving up into higher levels. But you're not going to earn a lot of bonds. You'll earn a few hundred. The best players who make it to the highest level and get on the leaderboard, they win large numbers of bonds. They will win a couple thousand bonds. For example, in this case, 5,750 bonds apparently went to the number one player. They have announced that they are going to make changes to the bond award, but it has not been released yet. So the players, to get improved equipment, better coated optics, better vertical stabilizer, etc., you have to be one of the top players, get to the top level to win lots of bonds, or you have to participate in ranked battles many times over the course of many weeks to get enough bonds to purchase one piece of equipment. It could take a long time if you're not one of the top, let's say you're not one of the top 1% of players. You can earn the bonds, but it's going to take a long time. And right now they're only awarded in Tier 10. Ranked battles are Tier 10 and grand battles are Tier 10. Now they have announced that they are going to make it easier, or they're going to change somehow the way you win bonds, but it has not been announced yet. But hopefully in the future there's going to be more options for winning bonds, or maybe for purchasing them in the premium shop. I don't know. Okay, so I realized that what I want the bonds for is for the equipment. And the improved equipment costs 5,000 bonds or 4,000 bonds. And I realized that it would take many weeks or months for me to earn it, and tons of battles and many hours of gameplay. So I said it wasn't worth it, and I decided not to do it. And I don't think it's really worth it to use directives, but if I have it to use directives, I will do so. So as the game is right now, this is version 9.19. It's very difficult for the average, for 99% of you, to earn a large number of bonds, especially if you want to buy improved equipment. Only a few people are going to be able to afford improved equipment in the current version. Okay, now you can either buy improved equipment, which is over here, with bonds, or you can buy directives. For improved equipment, you need at least 3,000 bonds. And for directives, I think they're as low as 2 bonds and as high as 12. So you can buy firefighting for 2 bonds, for example. Okay, now, improved equipment it's more cost efficient if you have fewer tanks. Because if you have fewer tanks, you're going to buy less improved equipment. I have 133 tanks. It's unrealistic. I would have to buy 400 improved equipment. It would be impossible for me to come up with 200,000 bonds or whatever is required. I would never be able to equip all of my tanks. So the repair kit can be used on any tank, demounting it, no cost. But the rest of the equipment, it costs something to demount them, and because it's complex equipment. So I really, if I were to win enough money to buy the equipment, I would only be able to put it on one tank, and I only play each tank once or twice per day. So it's really not cost efficient for me because I have so many tanks, and I only play each tank once or twice per day. So for me, it's not cost efficient, but if you have a few tanks, it is. So therefore, for me, I'm probably going to end up using my bonds at this current time with directives, although it might change. And if I do, obviously, eventually purchase improved equipment, it's going to go on my absolute favorite tanks, like the AMX 1390, or whatever tanks I play the most. Okay, so some of the single-use directives are expensive, 12 bonds, and some are cheap, 2 bonds. So obviously, every item is not the same price. So if you really want the most bang for your buck, you're going to use something like firefighting. 2 bonds is really cheap. That's 150 games with the firefighting skill. That's pretty good. Now, I calculated what's the benefit if you have coated optics, and it's currently giving you, oh, it doesn't say, okay, where do I get it? Give you 10% additional view range. And you look at experimental optics, gives you 12.5% view range. What's that difference? We're going to look up view range over here. You can see that coated optics gives me an additional 43 meters. And experimental optics are going to give me 25% more, which means that if I get experimental optics and remove coated optics, if I buy bonds, which is, let's say, 4,000 or 5,000 bonds, however much it costs, it's going to give me around an extra 11 meters of spotting distance. Is it worth it to go through hours and hours of gameplay Tier 10 where you're losing lots of money? Because Tier 10 is very expensive to play. It's not as cheap as all the other tiers. If you play Tier 10 and you lose, you lose lots of money. Your silver will decline rapidly. Is it worth it to put all that effort into buying the stronger equipment? It really isn't. It's very much the opposite. So if you look at the advantage, this is how you calculate it. For example, improved ventilation, I get plus 10 for my spotting range. If I used the improved ventilation that comes purchased from using bonds, I'm going to get an additional 2.5 spotting range. You take the existing value, which is the plus 10, next to improved ventilation, and you add 25%, which is 2.5. So that's how you calculate the difference. And the same goes with directives. Now I'm going to go through, I clicked on the wrong thing. I'm going to go through the equipment, the improved equipment real fast. You can see that it's 12.5% to aiming speed, the gun laying drive, the vents, the gun rammer, the coated optics, and the repair kit. That is what you can buy. For me, I would say the vents are really important. Almost every one of my tanks has vents on it because it improves all sorts of crew skills. And coated optics I have on almost every tank. So those are very important to me. If you have a tank destroyer or an SPG, you're going to want that gun laying drive. And if you have a tank that does lots of close combat or you fire frequently, you're going to want the innovative loading system, which is like a gun rammer. The toolkit might be, if you get tracked a lot, like if you have a Type 5 Heavy or a turretless tank destroyer, you might want the repair kit. When I used to play the Rampage Domination mode, I used to use a toolkit so it repaired the tracks really fast. And I also used it in the soccer game mode because you were being tracked constantly. Now, in terms of directives, this is a little bit difficult to understand. If you read through it, you'll understand what I mean. There's 2 options. I'm going to use concealment and camouflage as an example. The first one says gives all crew members a concealment skill trained to 100%. And it's not proper English grammar, what it says. And then the second one is additional 10% to vehicle concealment. The first one is if I did not have concealment on my crew. But I do have concealment and everyone is already at 100%. So what it's going to do is it's going to give me an extra 10% for concealment. If I didn't have crew members with concealment, it would make it as if I did have all of them at 100%. I hope that's easy to understand. Let's see if we can check out concealment over here. Okay, so now there is the directives are not listed right now in the info bar on the right side for concealment, mobility, survivability. It doesn't have directives in patch 9.19. I'm going to give another example. This tank has snapshot at 94%. If I were to use this directive, it would bump it up to 100%. If I already had it at 100%, it would double the effect. And that's how it works. I'm going to use one more example. Designated target. I do not have designated target. I chose the Deadeye, which does more damage. I don't have designated target, which is a perk. So if I use this directive, which is only 2 bonds, it would give me the designated target perk in that game. If I already had designated target, it would add an additional 2 seconds. So it would go from the existing 2 seconds plus another 2 seconds, which would make it 4 seconds. Based on what I've seen, and also there's an option to auto resupply, I really think that the most cost effective is firefighting. And the reason why is because this has 6 crew members. I've only got firefighting on 1 guy. For only 2 bonds, I could get firefighting on 6 guys, and I don't need the automatic fire extinguisher. Having firefighting on 6 guys is way better than the automatic fire extinguisher, because the automatic fire extinguisher, you use it once, and then you got to wait for a cooldown, and you could catch on fire again. But if you had it on your crew, you don't have to pay for the firefighting consumable. You don't have to suffer the 90-second wait for the cooldown. And if you're playing in something like Domination or Rampage mode, you could catch on fire often. Or if you have a Chinese heavy tank that catches on fire often, you want the firefighting skill. So if you have a tank that's vulnerable to catching on fire, this is a very affordable skill, and I highly recommend it if you have a lot of bonds and you don't know what to do with them. Another example is 6th Sense, very important. If you have something like a CDC that damages your ammo rack, I would say my ammo rack was damaged almost half the time, almost every other game, until I put safe stowage on all of my tanks. Or maybe if you're in a clan battle, you might want to use the safe stowage directive. In terms of equipment, let's say, for example, you're doing a campaign mission and you have to do spotting damage, and you really want to get a little bit more. You can use, for example, the optical calibration directive, pay the 8 bonds, get that extra 11 meters of spotting range, and maybe you'll spot more damage. If you're doing specialized missions where you have to do a certain amount of damage, or you have to snipe from a distance or spot more, etc., then you might enjoy using bonds for those specialized games. In general battle, I would say you probably don't want to use the directives for every game, because eventually you're going to run out. You could easily run out over the course of one weekend. I have 300 bonds in one weekend, and perhaps even if I use the expensive bonds in one or 2 hours, I could use up all of my bonds. So I think you should save it for your highest tier battles or your specialized battles when you really need to achieve something, you need a little bit of an extra edge, or if you're in a clan battle or something like that. I think you should save your directives for those particular games. However, if you do have a lot of bonds, and there's something that you've never used before, for example, maybe you've never used 6th Sense before, this gives you a chance to try it out. So get into, if you're playing ranked battles, you got to have a tier 10 tank, so obviously you probably have had 6th Sense before. But you might not have clutch braking or smooth ride on all of your tank destroyers. You might have one or the other. Or you might not have a Call for Vengeance. Very few people have Call for Vengeance, but it's very important for spotting. I am waiting for the day, I'm excited about the day that I'm going to finally have a Call for Vengeance on some of my tanks, and this gives me a chance to try it out for only 4 bonds, really cheap. Okay, so that is my comments about bonds. In general, Only a few people, the top 1%, are really going to be able to take advantage of the improved equipment. For the rest of you, you're only going to be able to use directives for those special games, clan battles, personal missions, when you really got to get that mission in, or for something like firefighting, or just for experimenting with a skill or perk that you don't have yet that you hope to get someday. It lets you try it out before you get it. Okay, so that is directives and improved equipment that you can purchase with bonds. If you have any questions or comments, please post below.